Alrighty, welcome everybody to the Murray Amateur Radio Club. We are going to be talking about public service events, in particular Utah SAG. And this presentation it's not going to last for an hour. I just don't have very many slides. We should be able to get through these 385 slides pretty quick. So. And if you know me, you know whatever comes out of my mouth, it's you probably ought to fact check it, right? So welcome, Provo for Utah County for coming down, and appreciate your visit. What prompted you to come down today?
I actually got an email.
You got an email?
Yeah, because I'm on the roster for Standing Amateur Radio Club, and there was an email put out from this club on their website. And I'm like, I'm ready to go up there.
Okay, fantastic. Well, welcome. For those on Zoom, Utah County, in particular, the EC from Utah County, Karen, she received an email, and she's down here. Apparently she wants to see how we do it down here or up here. I'm not sure which way it is. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Anywho, let's go ahead and start off. Again, we're going to talk about public service events and Utah SAG. So there's a quick agenda that we're going to be discussing. So I want to emphasize something, and if you forget everything that you've listened to or heard tonight, remember this: practice makes perfect every time, okay? So the more we practice whatever it is, the better we become. You've heard the idiom, practice makes perfect, right? Yeah, so it conveys the notion that if you do something repetitively, you'll get better at it. And that's the whole idea. If you're doing something under the guidance of practice makes perfect, you're likely trying to prove your skills through repeated efforts. As a matter of fact, that is the best way that I know how for me to learn something, especially since I have a horrible memorization issue. I cannot memorize. I have to go through the motions. And if I do it enough, then it becomes part of my DNA. Okay? But I have to do it hundreds of times. I'm not one of those lucky people that can go take their extra, read the questions.
Once and say, I'm all good.
Yeah, exactly. So, but let me add something to this practice makes perfect. Vince Lombardi, he kind of changed it a little bit. Practice does not make perfect. Only perfect practice makes perfect, okay? And I really like that because whatever we're practicing, it has to be done correctly. Because if you're practicing it incorrectly, guess what? Your memory muscle will do things incorrectly. So, perfect practice makes perfect. And so that's what we try to do, which means that we need to learn it perfectly, okay? That kind of gives us a responsibility on us to, don't take my word for it. Where am I getting the source from? What's my source material? You should never assume that the doctor knows what he's talking about. Get a second opinion, okay? And the same thing with anything that we do. If we're not asking questions and taking responsibility for ourselves to find out if what we're learning is correct, then shame on us, because it could be imperfect. And the more we practice it imperfectly, guess what? The more imperfect we become, right? So we can correlate that to amateur radio practice. Becoming adept or proficient in the ham radio world also includes practice. Practice, practice, practice. I can't tell you how many times I heard that when I was learning the piano, when I was growing up. Practice, practice, practice. And today, I could sit down and play like 2 songs out of all the years that I did the piano. So, and I did tons of practice. Every day was at least 2 hours, and I absolutely hated it. And so that's a clue. If we want to really become good, then it really helps if we enjoy what we're practicing, right? It gives us a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Incentive to do the practice, to put in the time, if you like it. Now, one of the things that I am learning, and I just absolutely love it, is CW. If you were to ask me a year ago if I was ever consider, as a matter of fact, people have asked me, you're ever going to learn CW? And I just laugh at them because my brain does not memorize, okay? And I've tried, I can't tell you how many times I've tried to learn CW. And I really wanted to do it, but I was trying to memorize the dits and das. And it wasn't until it was the Rat Pack. They had a presentation from the Long Island CW Club that taught a certain way of learning CW. And I go, holy moly, this is like a great idea. And so I joined the Long Island CW Club, and in 4 weeks, I learned 22 letters of the alphabet. 4 weeks. And I loved doing CW, and I learned them at 15 words a minute. Okay, not the 5 words a minute that you had to do when you were a novice back in the day. And that blows my mind that I'm a lot better at sending than receiving. That will come in time, but I absolutely love it. And if I hated it like I did the piano, I would have, I put my own barriers up. So we can put our own barriers up by not liking it. So, that was kind of a squirrel. But it's very true. Tell me if I'm wrong. And if you tell me I'm wrong, then you're going to come up and do this presentation. So there you go. So without practice, you may become inept instead of adept. And so we don't want to be inept ham radio operators, right? We want to be good at our practice, at our craft. So what are some fun ways of practicing perfectly? And I'm going to always include that practicing perfectly because they go hand in hand. Give me some ideas of how we can practice perfectly our ham radio skills. I'm sorry? Participating in events, okay. Participating in a net, excellent. Any other ideas? Go have fun outside? Just doing it, huh? And seeing what works. And if it doesn't work, what do? You tweak it, don't you?
It's really interesting. I got on the radio the other day, and there was a husband and wife, and the husband was the one walking around town, and the wife was at home, and they were just doing signal reports, so all the walks in town, and what works, what didn't work, different power levels, and obviously conditions vary, right? It's not perfect. But I thought that was really interesting. But I was like, what am I doing my life?
Excellent, and that is so true. Right before the front runner, I went through the course, and we had 4 repeater frequencies that we were going to use for the front runner century ride. And so every 3 miles, 2 or 3 miles, I stopped and I went through every frequency and I marked down the signal strength of the return. And I knew based on what I did, I was able to see, well, if you have an HT, you're not going to have any problems in this area here. But in this area, you just might. If you're not in a mobile, then you're going to have to be relayed, right? And so doing that type of stuff, going through and verifying the repeaters are working and that kind of
Well,
stuff.
I was your operator, and it worked in 1 minute, and I was standing in the same exact spot, and it wasn't moving the next. There was literally a 2-minute gap. You
Yeah.
heard me, and then that's 2 minutes later, you couldn't hear me. But then we switched to a different repeater.
Yep, crazy stuff. I still think ham radio is black magic. I just know it is, because there are so many weird things that can happen. As a matter of fact, on the front runner, we noticed this. It lasted from 8 a.m. until 4 o'clock p.m. and the propagation changed on some of the frequencies that we were running, you know? And you don't expect that your propagation will get all messed up if, you know, using a repeater, but it can, you know? So it's fun to do that. So let's talk about reasons why we become ham radio operators. Kind of goes hand in hand with this. Obviously, there's emergency communications. When I first became a ham radio operator, that was my #1 goal. I wanted to be into MCOMs. Why? That's because I went through a couple of 7.5 and 7.4 earthquakes that will be visiting Salt Lake County anytime, right? And so that is the whole reason why I'm into ham radio. Then we have communicating with people around the world. To me, that was just a bonus. When I became a general, I realized that, wow, I can talk to people all around the world. Who's had the opportunity of talking to people outside of Utah using HF? And did you like it? It's not something you do every day. You know, people tell me, well, Dan, just pick up your cell phone and you can call anybody you want to. Well, yeah, that's true. But what does a cell phone have that HF, the ham radio, doesn't have? An infrastructure requirement, right? And without the infrastructure, your smartphone is a paperweight. Technical skill development is another reason why people get into ham radios. Whoop, what happened there? We get to use really neat pieces of electronic gear. You see, especially like that Yaesu 10, where you have the 3D history waterfall. I think that is pretty cool. I don't know how useful it is, but people tell me they like it when I've talked to them.
I think it'd be useful if you could see a signal somewhere else where you're not at, so you could dial over to see what you're doing.
Oh yeah, and that's one thing great about the waterfall is you can see, especially when we're contesting, right? You want to, you can pick out the signals where they are. So you get to use a lot of different pieces of equipment. When I show people my ham shack that I built, I built the desk and I calculated the angle that I wanted it. I didn't want it just straight on. I wanted it to be looking at me. Stuff like that is cool if you do it yourself, right? And I have all my electronics in there. And if you don't know any better, you're thinking, is Dan a spy? Is he talking to Russia? So anyway, also learning the principles of radio wave propagation. That's another reason why people would get into it. And mastering these technical skills often leads to a career. That's another reason why people might want to get into amateur radio. And you then become or can become a resource to the public, both private, non-governmental organizations and governmental agencies by being a ham radio operator. And it's that last thing that we're going to talk about, becoming a resource to the public. So let's talk about public service events. The best way to learn how to ride a bike is not by reading the manual. The best way to learn how to read a bike is what? Get on the bike and ride it.
When you fall, get back up and do it.
And you're gonna fall, you're gonna have some Band-Aids that'll be on your knees and whatnot. I remember, okay. Even when you're good at riding a bike, things happen. I remember one time, and I'll never forget this, I'm pushing, kind of going uphill. And so I'm putting a lot of power down, and my foot slipped off. And my crotch went up into the bar. And I tell you what, that was a life-changing event for me. I was wondering if I could have kids at that point. Things happen, but the only way to learn how to ride a bike is to ride a bike, right? The best way to learn how to perform emergency communications is not to read about it, but to actually get on the radio and do it. Same thing holds true. So what better way to learn and develop your emergency communication skills than to participate in public service events? Now, my question to you is why? If we are participating in public service events, how does that equate to perfectly practicing for emergency communications event?
You're out there to help people if they have an issue.
Excellent.
And get help for them when they need it.
Okay, so you're there to help people. Okay, what else?
To get out in the weather or enjoy it.
Enjoy it in the weather. Yes.
Test the equipment.
Test the equipment. Okay.
Each event can go a bit different. You can have an event that is no problems, straight through, easy peasy, or you can have an event that is crazy and is requiring you to, you're all over the place.
See, and that answer tells me that you've been involved with events. And unless you've been involved with events, that's exactly right. So,
It also teaches you to work with others.
I'm sorry?
It also helps you learn how to work with others.
It helps us learn how to work with others, and that is so important, isn't it?
It's not very fun to talk to yourself.
Exactly. Radio's not very fun when you're talking to yourself. I'm repeating this to put it on the record, as it were. Okay, so what's the common factor? What's the common factor between public service event and a grid down event? And I think we already talked about it. It is the unknown. One event could be absolutely, you're bored stiff. Those are, first of all, few and far between. Okay, there's always something, right? But the point is, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know, like the front runner event. We had, oh my goodness, we had so many hospital visits from those riders. We had so many issues that you had to think on your feet, didn't you? Which happens to be, the reason why I like doing public service events. You deal with the unknown. No one knows what's going to happen next, and emergency communications in disaster also deals with the unknown. We don't know what the disaster holds. The earthquake that I experienced, even though it was a 7.5 and a 7.4 earthquake in Chile, it's going to be different here in Salt Lake County, okay? So all I can do is prepare and try and learn as much as I can, because we're going to have to be able to learn how to think outside of the box. And this is what doing public service events does. Participating in public service events allows us to practice thinking outside of the box, allows us to hone our skills and perfect our craft. I don't know of any other event that you can go through that that does this. We're dealing with the unknown all the time, and not only the event itself, but everything else that goes into ham radio, the propagation, the being able to communicate with your fellow hammers out there. There's so much involved. You have this huge craft, ham radio, right? Amateur radio. There's so many links that are involved with amateur radio on a good day. Now you add the grid down event or a public service event, and there's a whole bunch of other links that come into play. So that is why it is so freaking critical to practice perfectly. So, what's the best way to begin public service event work? That is my question. And I think you know what the answer is. Become a Utah SAG volunteer. Now, let's talk about Utah SAG for a second. Can I have, Neil, could you read that first paragraph of the mission statement there?
To provide technical training to all amateur radio operators, clubs, and organizations in the state of Utah for the purpose of providing communication support for public service events, community service projects, emergency service organizations, and government agencies in the event of public emergencies, as well as provide for the expansion and enrichment of the amateur radio hobby.
Okay, that is one sentence. My English teacher would have a heart attack if she read this. But that is what the mission statement was. That's what Mickey produced, and I'm leaving it, okay? To provide technical training to amateur radio operators, clubs, organizations in the state of Utah, which means that we operate from Logan all the way down to St. George, okay? Our primary service is to provide support for public service events. Even though we participate and can assist and be a resource in emergency communications, we support Salt Lake County ARES and Utah County ARES and Davis County ARES and Weber County ARES, all of the ARES groups. Our primary service is to provide support for public service events. In addition, we work hand in hand, well, I just said that, with ARES groups. To provide a resource in the event of an emergency. Utah SAG also supports the Utah, what's the NWS? National Weather Service. Okay, in Salt Lake City, providing support in the in weather-related emergencies. We have Skywarn that we deal with. Yes.
Are they wanting to see what the solid process to do Skywarn nets?
We are working with them. If you recall, when Mickey was alive, they were in the process of building out a new radio room, an expansion to the Salt Lake National Weather Service building. And so we're waiting for that to happen. And so until that happens, well, we could still have the Skywarn event, and I haven't heard anything from those guys yet. So that might happen though. So we'll just have to see. Okay, so why join? That's, what is it? What do I get out of it? Well, at Utah SAG, we believe everyone has the power to make a positive impact in their community. Those of us who do the 4th of July parade in Murray, do you think that has an impact on Murray City? You guys do parades at Utah County, other public service, what are some other public service events that you guys deal with consistently? Yeah, there's something happening this Saturday, isn't there?
Yeah, we have ham radio operators.
Yep,
We have, Springville Parade. We have
Springville Parade,
Snow Peak,
Snow Peak,
50K, which is an ultra marathon that we usually have 200 to 300 runners that we have to make sure gets off the mountain.
and I'll tell you, my first year that I did that, I was in a Grand Caravan going up that four-wheel drive. I'm passing Wranglers, Renegade Wranglers, and they're looking at me and say, why are you up here? Because I'm in this Grand Caravan going up there. But hey, I got to my aid station. It was a success. So great memories of that day. What are some other things going on?
Orange fireworks this weekend, and the parade. We've got a safety fair that will be out promoting ham radio. We've got a couple of bike events that come out through our county. Wasatch 100.
That's coming right around the corner, huh?
4th of July parade is the big one. The Provo. 4th of July, I usually have 30 plus ham radio operators.
Excellent. I think most everybody in the club is out at the Murray Parade and the 5K run. I enjoy it. You guys enjoy it? Should we cancel it this year? Have a barbecue said. Well, it's hot enough, you'll be all barbecuing out there anyway. So there's lots of public events that we can. Now before COVID, every weekend I was out doing something with Mickey and crew. Every weekend. And I just gained a love for public events. And it's just like a cool thing. Why? Well, because I enjoy it. I was allowed to practice my craft, and there's always something that you didn't expect, right? There's always the unknowns, and I love that. I'm a troubleshooter by my vocation, and I love to have to think outside of the box. Okay, whether you have a few hours to spare or you can deal with a long-term commitment, we have opportunities for you. So this is the part I like about this whole presentation. I think this is the best sentence right here. Join us today and be part of something bigger than yourself. This is what ham radio support is all about, being part of a organization that is bigger than each individual. When we're dealing with public service events, 1 and 1 does not equal 2. 1 and 1 equals 10, 20, 30, okay? It really makes a difference. So together, we can make a difference. And you know what? I really don't like that, so I'm gonna cross out can and put together, we are the difference. And if you talk to anybody that's done these events, they'll tell you that. As a matter of fact, here's some of the past events that we've done. The Immigration Half Marathon is coming up right around the corner. I still need a help for net control. I'm going to be a net control with one other person. I could use another person for that. But we have all kinds of stuff that is from the north to the very last one, the fall tour of St. George. So lots of reasons to make your go box and work with it and practice it. So as you can see, Utah SAG needs your help. We have lots of events and we don't have enough operators. That is the horrible thing about this whole thing, is we are just screaming for help. Dozens of event directors rely on Utah SAG. You gain invaluable, perfect practice, and I think that is so critical. You become part of the solution, your skill level will increase, and you will love the people and places you work. I tell you what, I've worked the Wasatch 100 for years, and you will not, they will have to tie me to that mast out of my truck to keep me from going up there and working the Decker Canyon site. I'm sorry? Oh. It is.
There was one, I noticed there was a spare one thing, Utah spare one. I guess that's something you're working on.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I got pictures of Karen working the Skywarn there in the building. Yep. As soon as I find out, I'll let everybody know. Okay. But tell me, Karen and Taylor, is this something that you enjoy doing? Do you love what you do?
Absolutely, 100%.
Do you do it right all the time?
No.
And that's important to understand, okay? Practicing perfectly does not mean you're going to do it perfectly every time, okay? You're going to fall down. You're going to have to pull a Band-Aid out. But as you get up, you learn something about what you did, and you become a better ham radio operator, okay? Can you imagine the chaos that we're going to experience when the big one hits? Even if you have all of the experience, we're going to have to learn. I keep circling around of thinking on our feet. And the best way to learn how to do that is by doing these events. And yes, Tim.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Many of you know the event officer in Sanford, which is where I'm from this building. And Karen and team deployed our mobile operations center down there. And one of our other team members was in there, and the officers that were in there, right, it's emotionally charged, right, obviously, and they're trying to figure out and coordinate with other people in the state, trying to find this guy, this huge down that fell loose. And it was very interesting. He's like, yeah, it's a rough situation. He's like, my job is helping communicate, and they're fumbling with the radio, but I know how that radio works.
Yeah.
And he's like, so I'm able to have them step back for a second. What are you trying to do? And he's like, within 2 minutes, we got the information we needed. We just didn't know what they wanted to do, so that they could actually think clearly, right? And I think about that. It's like how we, when it's a big one, so when that thing happens, right? We have to be the operators that are keeping a cool head because we've done it so many times before. If somebody falls down and needs an ambulance, I don't go, oh crap, who's going to call 911? But we have the front runner. I step in the street and I stop traffic and I take control of the situation.
Yeah.
But my primary job is to communicate, right? And so it's very interesting that we can be part of that solution rather than running like a chicken without.
And you bring up something that I want to reiterate, and I see this a lot. I used to be an EMT back in the day, so I'm very familiar with blood and guts out on accidents, okay? When I come across an accident, and it usually happens when I see the accident happen, people are starving for having somebody there that knows what to do. The public in general, that is why there is chaos, because there is ignorance. Ignorance and chaos are always in the same sentence, okay? As soon as you tell, this is, the last one, was it, what's the grocery store on 59th and 9th East? Macy's. A good friend of mine works there. He was carrying something that was blocking his view. He tripped on a pallet and he split open a good 5-inch gash on his forehead. And someone turned on the blood sieve, right? I mean, it just coming out, right? And I had just arrived there after it happened, and they already had, pressure applied to them, and so I evaluated what's going on, and you do that as you're coming up on the scene, right? You take a look at the 60,000 foot level, and you take a look at the immediacy, right? And I asked, did somebody call 911? And they go, no. So I point to this guy and I says, I need you, because I saw he had a phone. I need you to call 911 right now. And I'm pointing to people. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. And when people are assigned a task, the fear, the chaos goes away. They do their task. Okay, they forget about everything else. And so I'm not sure why I started that story. It was a good story. Anyway.
What's interesting about that, right? Our job is to communicate first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
But along those lines, sometimes us being in that contextually aware position also puts us in an excellent spot of leadership, and we can also help bring order out of that chaos, right? Like, we need to communicate. That's our first job, right? If I'm there with a police officer, I'm not, the police officer does this thing, I'm just there to get information.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But we have to, like, people freak out. The same thing happened to that same officer. We rolled up on a car accident, and everybody's out there videoing with their phone rather than calling the stupid ambulance.
Right, exactly. Isn't that crazy?
Why?
I
We practice perfectly is to be able to know what to do and what's important.
people are hungry to be told what to do. There's one other experience that I think is worth noting. I'm driving, I have no idea where it's at, middle of nowhere, and I see this station wagon coming towards me about 500 yards up the road. And the station wagon goes into the median, the soft shoulder, and it rolls. Okay, and I'm seeing this. Okay, you can see the dust cloud and everything, and we're 300, 400, 500 yards away. And so when we stopped, they already got some of the kids out there, but Grandma was still in the driver's seat. She was driving, and because I was the first one there, people, they weren't video anything. That was before everybody had to videotape something to put on YouTube or whatever. But no one knew what to do, and so I went in there and. I already made sure that someone called 911, and the highway patrol came up shortly, and I was still evaluating the grandma in the front seat, and I felt a very, very faint pulse, but she was strapped in, and you can't do CPR while they're sitting up, right? And so I asked, who has a knife? And you should see how quickly the highway patrol pulled out his knife, handed it to me, and we did what we did. We got Grandma out, and fortunately, she didn't make it. But even the cops, if you know what you're doing, if you look like you know what you're doing, they are behind you 110%. Okay, and whatever you need, I got. Right? And the same thing happens for ham radio, right? If we come up on these situations, being the communicator, being an effective communicator. Why? Why are we effective communicator? Because we practice perfectly. And we've done it time and time again. And it's because also you worked a number of Utah SAG events. I had to put that in there, okay? You will find, and here's a unwritten rule. It's written now because it's right there in front of you. You will find that the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And that's why those years before COVID, when we were doing it almost every single weekend, I absolutely ate it up. I put a lot into it, and I got a lot out of it. And everybody's invited to do the same thing. And with that, I'm ready to answer questions.
Well, I have a story about ham radio.
Okay.
we went down to Moab. There was 13 of us, our family, and we decided to do the long hike to the arch, and didn't start the trail until 12:30 in the afternoon. 106-degree temperature. And
It's a bad time to start.
it is. My wife and daughter both says, well, we gotta have practice before we go. We go and then have practice after. But, so we started down the trail, and out of the 12 of us that was actually on the trail, one granddaughter decided she wasn't gonna go. But there was 4 grandkids and myself that went ahead of some others. And because they stopped to rest and stuff. And so the 5 of us got up to the arch, seeing it, the others never made it. But they turned around and started back, but my daughter collapsed on the trail. And it took 4 hours to get her off the trail. And my wife wasn't feeling too well either. But while I was going on, I talked to this German lady. Her and her boyfriend were here seeing the sights, and they were police officers over there and had some medical training.
Mhm.
And so I talked to her. He was off taking pictures somewhere. I never did meet him. But when they went back down, they seen what was happening, and so he supposedly went to get some help. And when I seen what had happened, I went down. We're still quite a ways from the parking lot. So I ran down the rest of the way to see if there was some kind of communications that I could get some help with. Because I didn't know if this police officer from Germany knew English or would be able to communicate at all. So,
Machen Sie den Aufruf, bitte!
yeah.
What?
So when I got down there was nothing. There was no means of communication. Well, this van pulled out and headed down the road. And then there was another car that started to back out. I stopped the car. And I says, we've got somebody down on the trail, and we need help. She pulled right back into the stall, got on a ham radio, and called her husband, who was in the other vehicle that had just left. He had had medical training. He'd come right back, and he went up the trail with Gatorade and Jello and this and that. And everything. It ended up that it took 4 hours for medical people. I mean, the guy evidently got some help because an ambulance showed up.
Right.
And they went up the trail, but they couldn't get her stabilized. They was hoping to do that before they called for the rescue team with a gurney to take her down. And they ended up having to do that anyway. But it was 4 hours by the time she got to the hospital after she collapsed. But because of the ham radio, we got somebody there that could do something.
Yep. That's an awesome
And I had
story.
no idea what a ham radio was at that time. I wasn't into it.
Yeah,
That was before my ham radio days.
well, that's awesome. Anybody have any other comments? Stories? Suggestions?
One thing I think we all have to remember when we're out doing ham radio events, whether we're in net control or whether we're on the other side of net control or out of different aid stations or water stations or whatever we're doing, is that if net control sounds, a little sharp or a little bossy maybe, that it's not specifically directed toward that individual. It's just more that there's something going on when that controls that's got their attention.
Yeah. And all you got to do is be net control for one of these events, and you realize, especially when you're dealing with more than one repeater, I don't know how many times, and it wasn't a whole lot, but on one repeater at the front runner was the last one I worked, someone would call in a question and I'd just go stand by, and people need to understand that it's a very dynamic position you're in, right? And there's always things going on. It may not be radio traffic, it may be somebody coming up to you with dealing with some type of emergency, whatever. And so thanks, Karen, for that. Just knowing that there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes, you know, and in ham radio, everything is behind the scenes, right? You don't know, you're not looking at the person you're talking to. It's all behind the scenes. So keep that in mind. Yes.
One other comment, make sure you got the proper equipment while you're out doing one of these events. There was an educational one from Paintsville to Plain City.
Uh-huh.
It was like 65 miles round trip. And I was flight marshal.
Uh-huh.
Well, I was on a mountain bike. I couldn't keep up with anybody. Plus, I was so far out of shape to do that. And so, what kind of help was I really if I couldn't keep up with? I mean, I was halfway to the first rest area when they reported that some of the people had already was at the end line. And so I couldn't keep up with anybody.
Right.
So was I any good? Probably not.
And that's something that you learn, right?
That's,
I mean, we're going to fall off that bike, and that's to be expected. Expect that, and that's okay. Just don't do it again.
don't
we learn.
As a bike marshal
Right.
on a mountain bike. Be on a street bike.
Now,
Do a little bit better speed.
I had a similar experience with the front runner. What's the old adage? 2 is 1 and 1 is none. I brought my primary lithium iron phosphate battery Go Kit power supply box, and that's what I was running my radios on. And I heard and I go, oh no, the power supply went down. Now, I had a generator and a AC power supply. That's my last ditch effort, but I brought another battery power supply with me because I never knew that I never expect to use it, but I tell you what, if you have it and need it, it is a lifesaver. And I was off the air for no more than 3 minutes before I could open up the power supply and hook it up. And so it's be prepared for the unexpected. And that's one of those things where I always, like a 4th of July parade, I will use my VX6 Yaesu radio, and I will always have 2 batteries with me, always, okay? Now, when we're using our repeater, we only need the 300 milliwatt setting on that because it is just like perfect, right? And I could use that single battery all day long, okay? But I still bring the extra battery because 2 is 1 and 1 is none. You never know what's going to happen. Now, a question is asked on Zoom. What frequency bands and equipment do you use on SAG events? So that's a big question. The answer is we use a number of different frequencies, both simplex and the repeaters. Anytime before we do a SAG event, someone goes out there and evaluates which repeaters we're going to use, then that is published for everybody. Okay, so everybody knows which repeaters to use. What equipment? Well, what equipment do you have? If you're a SAG driver, if you're actually in the vehicle, obviously having a mobile radio with the capability of contacting all of the repeaters that we're going to be using. Usually it's, if you have a dual band radio, you're good to go. Generally speaking, just running off of 5 watts is all that's needed because that's all that's needed. We're able to hit repeaters quite nicely. If you're a bike marshal, that's a little bit different. I've seen bike marshals using mobile radios with a 12-volt battery that they're carrying along with them. I've seen bike marshals that just has their HT and everything in between. It's whatever you have. If you're a bike marshal though, actually if you're any position, what's the number one thing that will determine if you can actually make a contact? And it's not how many watts comes out of your radio. It's the antenna, right? You can have you can have a 3,000 watt. As a matter of fact, you go on Amazon and they sell ham radio HTs that have like 300 watts that they're advertising, right? And first of all, if it was true, you think I'd want to have 300 watts right by my head? Right, okay, so there's, so yeah, using a great antenna is the name of the game, right? So, and I've seen bike marshals, they'll have their mobile antenna that they have set up, and I see most of them, they just have not the rubber ducky, but aftermarket, that's the word I'm looking for. They usually have aftermarket antennas on there, the better gain, and I've seen some of them with the rubber duckies. As a matter of fact, in my HT Go kit that is just a little teeny bag, I have 3 antennas in that sucker. I have the rubber ducky, I have a high gain, and I have a roll-up J-pole, right? You don't know what you don't know, right? What you need at the time, yes.
At the front runner metric, I had an operator, one of the bike marshals came up to me and she goes, I cannot hear net control, what am I doing wrong? And I think that's all, great question to ask, right, is, don't be discouraged when something's not working. But it turned out she wasn't even using the right repeater, she didn't have the updated information, she didn't have any documentation with her to know what frequencies were available, what the backups were, etc. And it was really interesting because she's like, and then when we tried keying it up, the battery was dead. She only uses her radio at this one event once a year, right? And so it's important to test out your equipment. We have a Hobbler half marathon that's coming up in a month, and our operators will go and make sure that because we have one spot where it's like you have to have a Yagi and a tall max in order to get the repeater. And so go try it, try something out, have a backup. And so they'll go out and they'll do it on their own time or on Saturday or whatever. And that's great, right? It's participating in those things, practicing it, helps you to mitigate those common problems that all of us face.
My first year up at Wasatch, the Wasatch 100, the Decker Canyon, I'm right. There's a reason why they call it Decker Canyon, because you're right in a frickin' canyon, right? And my first year, I brought a 26-foot mast, and it was shoddy. I had to, I made it work, but I didn't like it. The next year, I brought my 40-foot mast, and I haven't had a problem since. So again, it's learning what you've learned and putting it into practice, and that's how we become better operators. Any other questions? Any questions? Any other questions on the Zoom? Okay, well, I think I'm going to give you another 35 minutes back. I knew we were going to end early, but I'm glad we had the discussion, and I want to invite everybody to try out a Utah SAG event. Now, one thing that I failed to mention, and I want to make sure everybody understands, if you've never done an event before and you're kind of timid, like I've never done this before, don't put me in charge of a radio. That's great. You're not going to be put in charge of a radio. You're going to be put with people who have done it before. Okay, and that is probably one of the best ways to learn, is see how other people are doing it. And don't ever think that you're going to be put out doing something that you weren't prepared to do. Okay, I will always pair you with somebody that has done it before. And so please consider doing additional events for Utah SAG and the other event. And with that, thank you very much for coming.
Can I say that one thing?
Yes, please.
So I just wanted to read something. I've been involved in ham radio. Seems like just yesterday, but I look at my license, I'm due to renew next year. But I work a lot with emergency managers within Utah County. And one of my emergency managers, when I very first started, told me this, and it has stuck with me ever since I got my license. And it's To each there comes in their lifetime a special moment when they are figuratively tapped on their shoulder and offered the chance to do a very special thing, unique to them and fitted to their talents. What a tragedy that moment finds them unprepared, unqualified for which what could have been their finest hour.
That is so true. Just the mere fact that you have a ham radio antenna, people may assume that you know how to talk on ham radios, right? And this goes back into practicing perfectly. And you never know when you're going to be needed. Okay, so one other thing that I forgot to mention, and that is I can't tell you the accolades that Utah SAG gets by the riders and runners in all of these events. If I were to count, and I tried counting one year, just a regular bike run, and it was in the hundreds of thank you, thank you, thank you as they're going by, because they know that without the communication aspect of it, it would be a different event, okay? And so they are very appreciative. The directors, the event directors are, it's incredible how appreciative they are. Your work is not unnoticed, okay? It is heavily noticed. And that's not the reason why I do it, but that's a nice thing to hear, right? Because they are very appreciative. Whether they're runners or bikers, doesn't matter. You'll hear that dozens of times throughout the day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So anyway, with that, thank you.
Dan,